May the meeting come to order, please. This is the October 20, 2021 meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage Board of Adjustment. I'm Bernd Gütschow, Chair. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Deep.
Yes.
Ms. Peace.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
Oh, very good. And I'm so sorry to see that Nancy is not present in person, because it makes it a little easier for me when I can see board members. Anyway, thank you, Nancy, for being available by telephone. Also present are our clerk, Jennifer Van Klassen, and our esteemed lawyer, Dennis Wheeler. You have received a copy of the agenda, and I would like you to quickly take a look at that and see if you have any changes, any additions or deletions to the agenda.
No change. I have none.
No changes there. Ms. Pease, any changes to the agenda?
None.
Okay, well, I have a change, and that concerns mostly our esteemed member Nancy Pease, because when you look at old business 5A1, she did not participate in the consideration of that and consequently cannot participate in that today. Also under 6A2, same thing. She did not participate in the consideration of the request to supplement the record, et cetera, and therefore cannot participate in any discussion today. So I would like to move those items to old business. I would like to move 6A2 to follow 5A1, so that it becomes 5B2, so that we can consider those two matters roughly in the same order, and so Nancy can, in the meantime, go and do her fingernails or stitching, or perhaps cook while we consider those items. Ms. Pease, do you understand what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to simplify things for you so that you don't have to come in and come out.
Yes, that's fine. Alternatively, if you wish to move 6B to the start of the agenda, I believe that's the main item of interest that I would be participating in. We could do that, and then you could be off the phone. I could be off the phone if you prefer.
Well, actually, I would like to leave it the way I suggested, because maybe you have some comments at the end. You will see that under number 7, there are member comments, and maybe you have something that you want to tell us. Anyway, do the board members have any difficulty with shifting the agenda as I suggested, so that 6A2 becomes 5B2?
That's fine with me.
Hearing no change, it is ordered that we change the agenda accordingly. Madam Clerk, does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
I know you proposed the agenda, so. All right. Minutes of the previous meeting is the next item on the agenda, number 4. And we are looking at the meeting of August 26. Have we all had an opportunity to review the minutes of August 26? Mr. Deek?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart? Ms. Pease?
Yes, I have. However, insofar as, yeah, I have.
Thank you. Are there any additions, changes, deletions that you have regarding those minutes? Mr. Deek?
No. Do we need to make a motion first?
Well, no. Wait a second. No changes, okay.
No.
Ms. Pease, any changes, additions, deletions?
No.
Okay. May I then have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Stewart. Can I have a second,
Yes,
please?
second, Tomasz.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seconded by Mr. Deek. All right, any discussion regarding that motion, or are we okay with it as is?
No,
Mr.
I've
Stewart?
read through it and I went through my notes. Everything's in complete compliance with my notes.
Okay, Mr. Deek?
Agreed as is.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pease, any?
No, I was excused from that meeting, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to vote for their approval or not, although I did look at them.
You are absolutely right. You're correct. Okay. I have no additions, changes, deletions, and so I'm going to simply ask the clerk to call the roll on the vote.
Mr. Kuchar,
Yes?
Mr. Deep,
Yes.
Mr. Stewart,
Yes.
Thank you. And as Ms. Pease correctly stated, she did not participate in it, so she really should not be voting on the approval of the minutes, but the minutes are approved. So then we come to old business. The first item on the agenda is 5A1, and that concerns the order denying the request to accept a notice of appeal that was signed by me on September 3, 2021. And the reason this is on the agenda is to formalize the matter, and the way to bring this up is by way of a motion for reconsideration. And so I would like to entertain a motion to reconsider the decision of the December 3, 2021 order denying the request to accept the notice of appeal. May I please?
Yeah.
May I
September
please-
3.
Okay. This is a motion to reconsider.
I would like to, Mr. Chair, I would like to move to reconsider said case.
Okay. May I have a second, please? Mr.
Second.
Stewart, are you going to second that?
Yes, second.
Thank you so much. Any discussion by Mr. Wheeler regarding this motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to speak to why I think a motion for reconsideration is appropriate, the strategy behind that. After I give my explanation, if the board would grant the motion and then move to affirm the order, that would be my recommendation, and here's why I'm suggesting it. You may know that at least one of the parties in this prior case, S12545, has filed an appeal in Superior Court, Joan Priestley. And in addition, I think Mr. Cooper et al. Filed a separate Superior Court proceeding. In at least one of those two appeals, there's an allegation that this body violated the Open Meetings Act in the way that it rendered this order, citing to the statute 4462.310, which is the state statute on open meetings. I will point out that under 4462.310D, the act does not apply to a governmental body performing a judicial or quasi-judicial function when holding a meeting solely to make a decision in the proceeding. So arguably, that act does not apply to this board when it rendered its decision regarding the notice of appeal. However, as a matter of strategy, just to close the door on that argument, I'm recommending that this body reconsider that order, discuss its reasons for the decision, and affirm the order now. And the reason for that is because under the same state statute, it says that if a governmental body has been alleged to have violated the statute, it can cure the violation by holding another meeting and conducting a substantial and public reconsideration of the matter considered. So that's why we did the motion for reconsideration, and that's why I'm asking you to discuss this order, just so we can close the door on that allegation.
So it's a two-step affair, really, what you're saying. The first one is that we consider the motion to reconsider, And once that motion passes in the affirmative, then we go to the substance and we simply look at that order of September 3 once more.
Yes.
Is that what you're proposing?
Yes, I would approve the motion to reconsider. Then I would suggest a motion to affirm.
Yep.
Discuss the decision and decide to affirm or not, as the case may be.
Okay. All right. Having heard what our esteemed counsel is saying about the matter, Mr. Stewart, you're the one who made the motion. Do you have any
Actually, I
additional?
did.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Yes, you
No
did.
worries.
Mr. Deek, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would just like to reiterate that in order to have the process to be bulletproof in terms of how we made a decision on the order, I think it's in the best interest of this body to support a reconsideration and then discuss the order. So we have an open public meeting where we can do that. So I'll support the motion to reconsider.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
I've looked through this particular order, and I think, based on council's recommendation, I think that we should just go ahead and rediscuss it again, reconsider it.
All right, thank you. I do not have any further comments. If there's nothing further to be said about the motion to reconsider, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the vote, please?
Mr. Kuchar?
Yes.
Mr. Deep?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion to reconsider the order of September 3, 2021 regarding case number 2021-2 has been, no, -3, I'm so sorry. Isn't that what we need to, yes, it's regarding appeal 2021-3, I apologize.
No, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
No.
It's just regarding the planning board
Planning.
case number because there was no pending appeal at the time, so there's no appeal number for this issue.
But we do have an appeal pending. So,
No, sir, that appeal number, I don't know, you may have written that, but that's not applicable to
I'm
this.
wrong? Oh, how can the chair be wrong? Ever. Anyway, concerning Planning Board case number 12-545, Canyon View Estate Subdivision, that motion to reconsider that order has been granted, and so then I will entertain a motion to affirm the order of September 3, 2021, denying the request to accept a notice of appeal. Mr. Stewart, I'm looking at you. Would you make that motion, please?
Yeah, make a motion to affirm the order regarding S-12-545 Canyon View Estate Subdivision.
Thank you. And I will second that myself to give Mr. Deek a break. So, Mr. Stewart, oh, maybe we should hear from Dennis Wheeler first. I take it you have reviewed that order
Yes, sir, I have.
I signed on September 3?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to keep this brief, but also try to cover the waterfront of this. As the board may
Yes.
recall, the underlying case had several appeals filed last year in the fall. Those cases went through a convoluted process because there was a motion regarding new evidence. The planning board ended up granting that, rehearing its case. There were motions filed in that matter. This board remanded that case back to the planning board regarding its decision and service and some other issues. The planning board then issued its decision in about the middle of May, and that, in my opinion, under the code, triggered the appeal clock. No appeal clock was filed within the required time frame once that decision was made on the record at, I believe, their May 18 meeting. Since no appeal was properly filed, well, I should back up. I think Donald Gosky filed an appeal timely, but the other parties did not. The clerk issued a letter to that effect regarding the status of the appeal period having run in July. Ms. Priestley filed request in August regarding her status, and then when we denied that, she filed this notice of appeal on September 1st. Given that I was going to be out of town for weeks, and I believe the chair, or at least one of the board members, will also be absent after that, there could have potentially been some delay in action on this matter for at least 30 days, if not more. I took it upon myself to put together an order regarding her request, since there was no active appeal in front of the body at that point, and the clerk did not have the authority to just simply dismiss or disregard the filing. We needed to do something with it proactive. I took the initiative to do that. I sent the board by email my draft. I advised the board not to deliberate or discuss it amongst yourselves, because that may, notwithstanding the statute I cited earlier, that may or may not have triggered a requirement for a meeting. I did not want you to have a serial meeting through email or phone calls or any other manner. The board individually reviewed the order and sent me any comments they had, if they had any edits. I then finalized the order for the chair's signature. That's the circumstances in terms of how we got to issuing the order on September 3rd. In terms of the actual merits of the case, as I noted in the draft order, the planning board process is in terms of an appeal, is a little bit convoluted, but effectively, the planning board issues a decision. Someone who has an objection to that decision can file a notice of intent to appeal. That then requires the planning director to create a final written decision. That written decision then gets adopted by the planning board, and then the planning board, having done that, triggers the appeal period. That appeal period is triggered when the decision is made. In that third or fourth step, it does not require specific service to any party, and I believe that's where the applicant in this case is confused or is mistaken in terms of what the code requires. There was an initial requirement for service early on, and that was accomplished. But once they make their decision approving the written formal decision, that triggers the clock, and the party did not comply with the requirement to file within that time period. That's the essence of this order. Is that we can't hear my recommendation is the board cannot hear the appeal because the clock is already run.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Stewart.
I just want to clarify, what was the quote to the 44?
The Open Meetings Act is codified in AS 44, 62, 310.
62, okay.
Yeah.
Any further comments, Mr. Stewart,
Okay,
regarding the motion you made?
No, I think that's a very good explanation of where we were at and what's contained in the order, and that we went through that, and it seemed like that particular order was in line with where we should be, and I believe that and we discussed this, I think, early on in the procedure, is that there was just too much time had evolved, and the clock had run already. So, with that in mind, I'm going to vote to affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I seconded that motion. By way of comments, I will incorporate the remarks made by Mr. Wheeler, and I will point to the findings of the order that I think adequately explain our decision that we came to on September the 3rd that denied Ms. Priestley's request to appeal for the reason that it was simply late, and we cannot undo the clock, basically, because it is a jurisdictional matter. So I will be approving the motion to confirm the decision of September 3, 2021. Mr. Deek, any comments, any further comments regarding that?
No further comments. I think this is the right process to ensure that the order is in the right place in terms of process. So I will support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Deek. Any further discussion regarding this matter? Mr.
No.
Stewart, anything further? Mr. Deek, anything further?
Nothing.
I have nothing further. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the vote on this motion to confirm?
Affirm.
To affirm. Is
Motion
it
to
affirm or confirm?
Affirm.
Affirm.
Good.
Mr. Gutschall, how do you vote on the motion to affirm?
Yes, I approve.
Mr. Deep?
Yes, I will approve it.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
And the motion passes 3-0. All right, then we turn to the other matter, and that concerns the order regarding the request to supplement the record, etc., in Board of Adjustment case number 2021-2. Again, there was an order that was entered on September 3, and the first matter to do is, as we did with the previous one, is to make a motion to reconsider that order, and I will make that motion to reconsider. May I have a second, please?
Second. I'm sorry.
Mr. Deek will second.
I'll second it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, may we hear from you regarding that matter, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason for bringing this up as an agenda item is the same as in the prior matter, which is to deal with an allegation regarding Open Meeting Act, notwithstanding the fact that the Open Meeting Act does not apply to a body performing its quasi-judicial function. It seems as a matter of addressing this issue, so it's moved in terms of the Superior Court appeals. If there is one, that we would cure the alleged violation, if you will, by having this body reconsider, and then should choose to do so, affirm the order issued on the 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. For the reasons stated by Mr. Wheeler, I intend to vote in favor of the motion to reconsider the decision of September 3, 2021 regarding the order regarding the request to supplement the record. Mr. Deek, you seconded that motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am in support of reconsidering the motion for procedural reasons stated before by counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Deek. Mr. Stewart, any discussion regarding the pending motion?
No further comments.
Okay, I have nothing further. Madam Clerk, when you're ready, would you please call the roll on the pending motion to reconsider the order of December 3, 2021, the order regarding the request to supplement the record on appeal in case number 2021-2.
Mr. Gutschall?
Yes.
Mr. Deep?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
And the motion passes by a vote of 3-0. So we are now reconsidering the decision of December 3, 2021 in appeal case 2021-2. And as I have been instructed to not call it to confirm but affirm, I will now call for a motion to affirm the decision of December 3, 2021 in appeal case 2021-2. May I have a motion, please, to that
Motion. I make a motion to affirm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stewart.
2021-2.
Okay, and Mr. Deek, are you prepared to second that as well?
Yes, I am prepared, yes.
Thank you very much. And may we please hear from Mr. Wheeler first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this particular case, the appellants filed a request to have the record supplemented with materials that they argued should be in the record. The appellee in this matter sent in a letter. They did not object to supplementing the record. given that we're not in a position, I should say this body's not in a position to judge the relevancy of any of the documents requested until such time as you actually have a record and briefing where you expect the parties to discuss the documents and how they might apply to their issues. And in the absence of an objection, it seemed expeditious and appropriate for the board to go ahead and grant that motion to supplement, which we did. The second argument the appellant had was regarding the fees and their objection to the amount of the fees and the method in which it was calculated. In my review, I determined that the appropriate code section for calculating fees would have resulted in higher costs to the appellants than what the municipal clerk's office had advised them in terms of what their costs would be. I felt it appropriate, since the clerk had already discussed with them the fees, to go ahead and give them the benefit of the reduced fees imposed by the clerk's office, feeling that was within your purview to grant that relief, since you can make some procedural modifications under your code authority. So we prepared an order containing those two items regarding the record and fees. And again, I believe this one we handled in the same manner as the prior one we discussed, which was I did it by email, since again there was the odds that we would be unable to meet expeditiously. And again, I think I communicated that if you had any concerns, not to deliberate amongst yourselves, but to send me those concerns. I formulated the order for the chair's signature, and it was issued.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Stewart.
I read through the Board of Adjustment order on this one, and the decision. And, as counsel has explained, this is very reasonable on the fees. And I think it's more than what would be reasonable. And I think everything that we have added to the record, that will be added, and then once it's in there, then we can consider it. So I'm going to vote to affirm this positively.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Deek?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Issue number one on this case is that the record is to be amended. There was no objection from the police, and we are looking at a case where it seems prudent to allow it, and that's what the order stated. I'm in support of that. And the second issue was the fees. While the request was to be full waiving of the fees, the order determines that there is an appropriate reduction of the fees based on the prior decision on them. Denial of the waiver, I think, is appropriate, and assessing a lower fee is also appropriate, so I'm in support of that decision. And I will vote in affirming this order.
Thank you, Mr. Deek. I have listened to Mr. Wheeler and the comments made by Mr. Stewart and Mr. Deek, and I incorporate their comments here, and I intend to vote in favor of the motion for the reasons that they have stated. Any further discussion regarding the pending motion to affirm the decision of September 3, 2021? If not, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Kuchar?
Yes.
Mr. Deek?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
And the record should reflect that the motion to affirm passes by a vote of 3-0. Thank you. We now come to new business, and Ms. Pease, if you have been away from the microphone, you should come back. Are you?
I am here.
Oh, good. And the record should reflect that Ms. Pease will be participating for the rest of the meeting in this manner. So the item that is now on the agenda is 6A, and that concerns a hearing, scheduling a hearing on appeal number 2021-2 Planning Board case number S12599, amendment to S12420, Spruce Terraces subdivision. And the first item we need to consider before we even schedule things is Ms. Pease's concerns regarding her participation in this matter. Ms. Pease, may we please hear from you?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The Spruce Terraces subdivision lies within my community council, Rabbit Creek Community Council, and I'm an active participant in that council. I chair the Land Use and Transportation Committee. I'm not on the board. That's not an elected position. We have, both in the committee and the council as a whole, considered Spruce Terraces subdivision and submitted comments at least twice in the last 2 years. So I would have been a leader in analyzing the plats and the proposed conditions of approval and in putting together discussion and points or comments for the council to vote on. And of course, I voted to submit comments twice.
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Wheeler, is it up to the board to decide whether there's a conflict of interest, or is it up to the person who brings up the matter in the first place? In other words, should Ms. P simply recuse herself if she wishes to do so, or should we have a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend a motion on
Okay,
this.
all right, thank you. Ms. Pease, are you inclined to make a motion regarding your status in this matter, or should we look at somebody else to make that?
Yeah, no, I move to recuse myself from serving on the Board of Adjustment in this case, given that I have previously participated in community council analysis and comments and have represented that perspective in, already on record.
All right, thank you, and I will be seconding that motion. Do you have anything further to say, Ms. Pease, regarding your own motion?
No, well, just that I think it's very important that all parties feel they're having, that the Board of Adjustment is a neutral body, and I don't feel that a person who participates from the community council perspective can be perceived by everybody as being fully neutral. So,
Okay.
therefore, I ask that you vote to recuse me.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pease. I intend to support that motion, and I must say, mostly out of a sense of abundance of caution, so that it cannot be said that any board member here was had any preconceived ideas or opinions regarding appeal number 2021-2. So I intend to support that motion that Ms. Pease not participate in the consideration of the decision of that case. Mr. Deek.
I do have one comment, and I will start with that. Based on what I heard from Ms. Pease and you as the chair, I will support the motion. I do want to point out that in a community of our size, this is a lingering issue, and the bias or the appearance of bias is being a very important, relevant issue in terms of our procedures. But I also have the concern that we will constantly recuse ourselves because we live here. And I'm not sure what way we're going to express it through this motion, but I just want to put that caution out there that I believe participating versus being biased is two things. The appearance is the bias, but I would act on the side of caution, so that's why I will support the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Deek. Mr. Stewart?
I just have a question for council. Is if we ask the person that's asking to recuse themselves, if they can have, if they have any bias, make a decision and remain neutral and set aside any biases that they may have, can that cure something like that? Can it cure that wouldn't cure the appearance, but it might cure the rest of it.
Through the chair, Mr. Stewart, I think that actually is the answer. It wouldn't cure the appearance, right? So if you could make a finding that, based on your understanding of her abilities and her statements regarding her willingness and ability to look at this case fully and fairly, you still have the appearance issue, and I think you're inviting an unhappy appellant or appellee to challenge your decision on that basis. You don't need her to make a panel, and not going to be able to get rid of that appearance issue. So I think it's a really good practice to grant the motion to recuse and move forward with a panel that does not have that hanging over their head.
Okay, so that would clarify. That would in fact be a reason for an appellate issue to be raised, if there was an appearance.
They can certainly make the arguments, and then you have to deal with the issue. Whether you prevail or they prevail, who knows how the case goes. We don't know what her comments have been or what her vote has been, and we don't need to inquire at this point regarding that. Try to make some analysis as to whether we think she can move forward. I think you're much better off just allowing her to recuse. Now, if you were in a situation where she wasn't quite an active participant, but she attended the meetings, or maybe you needed another body for the panel so people aren't held up and not able to get a decision, you might be able to deal with this issue more directly, and maybe you invite the parties to enter their objection or non-objection, so you kind of know where you stand with them. But I think you're much better off in this case. You don't have that need to delve into it.
Yeah,
So
and
you're better off recusing.
on this case, she did indicate that she had, I inferred that, or it's my understanding that she signed on to 2 specific inputs from that committee. So she had some pretty strong active participation. So I intend to vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I intend to vote in favor of the motion as well. Ms. Pease is a very active community member, and she has strong views on matters. And whether she has an actual conflict here or not, to my way of thinking, what controls my vote is the appearance of a conflict. And so I intend to vote for it. Having said that, Mr. Deek's comments regarding the size of this community and the fact that we all live here and we all know properties, this is an issue that comes up all the time, not just before this board, but before other land use planning boards. And so it's always a difficult decision whether on the basis of our knowledge we need to excuse ourselves from participating in the decision or not. But I think in this case, leaving that aside here, the appearance of a conflict here is very strong, and so I would vote in favor of the motion. Any further discussion regarding that matter? Ms. Pease, any final thoughts? You are the one who made the motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did emphasize verbally that I wanted to avoid a perceived conflict of interest, and I agree with, I believe it was Mr. Stewart or Mr. Wheeler who said that if the board were short of a quorum for this case, or I would then be more than willing to go through my specific role and assert that I felt I could consider the appeal separate from prior participation neutrally and fairly. But in this case, it's the appearance that I think of conflict of interest that I think we can and should avoid. If so, that's the basis for my recusal request.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pease. Any further discussions regarding this matter? Mr. Deek? No. Mr. Stewart? No. And I have no further discussion. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the motion, please?
Mr. Bouchard?
Yes.
Mr. Deek?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
And the motion passes by a vote of 3-0 in favor of.
Mr.
Oh,
Pease
Ms.
also would vote?
I'm sorry.
Shall we get Ms. Pease's vote as well?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ms. Pease?
Yes.
I apologize.
No
I'm
problem.
simply looking at people here as opposed to listening to telephone. All right, the motion passes by a vote of 4-0, and Ms. Pease is excused from the consideration of that appeal, 2021-2. We then come to item number 6B on the agenda, and that concerns a pending appeal, 2021-3. We have had the notice of appeal that was filed by the law office of Pope and Kacher for...
Mr. Chair, do we want to schedule the case we just discussed?
Thank you. Why am I jumping ahead today? It leaves then 3 members to decide case 2021-2, and I gather the record is complete on that, Madam Clerk? That's correct, is it not?
That is correct.
So it is then totally appropriate, and thank you, Mr. Deek. I've had a bad morning already, so thank you for pointing out my deficiencies here. Yes, Madam Clerk?
May I clarify, Mr. Chair? The appeal record is ready. We haven't received all briefings yet. So I may have jumped the gun in saying it was entirely complete. So we're still waiting on 2 briefings.
Okay, all right. But it is appropriate then to schedule a hearing to consider that already, because as far as we know, the briefings are underway, correct, Madam Clerk?
As far as we know, Mr. Wheeler may wish to...
Mr. Wheeler, do you know anything different about 2021-2? That's not underway?
Madam Chair, is this the one where the appellants have indicated the decision? I'm sorry. Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk.
That's okay.
Baron and I are contagious in terms of
Yeah.
mixing our verbiage. Madam Clerk, is this the appeal where the appellants have indicated their intention not to file a brief?
That's not to file an opening brief.
Correct.
That's correct.
So I've advised the clerk that because the appellants have chosen not to file the brief, she needs to send out a notice indicating the appellee's briefing cycle starts now because the appellants have chosen not to file the brief.
And so we should ask the clerk, did you send out that notice?
I have not yet.
Ooh, okay.
It's been less than a week since we received that, maybe 5 days. So
Okay.
I can get that underway in the next day or 2, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. But that should not impede us from setting a hearing schedule,
I don't
should it?
think so.
Okay, all right. There being only the 3 of us who can consider it, I need to look at my 2 board members that are present here, and I am suggesting December the 7th or the 8th. And I should first ask Mr. Wheeler, because he's got a lot of work to do until that time, would you be prepared to have your bench memo at the beginning of December to us? Is that a problem?
Yes, sir. No, sir.
Okay, all right. Then let me ask the other board members here, how are your schedules for December the 7th or the 8th? Mr. Stewart, first of all.
I'm available on the 8th, not available on the 7th.
Okay, are you available all day long on the
Yes.
8th?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go off the record for a minute. You've had too much coffee.
Are we just taking a break, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm going to leave your recording going.
Okay.
That's fine. Nancy, just so you understand, Mr. Wheeler had to leave temporarily, and he will be back shortly. That's
All right, I will continue to listen. Thank you.
Please. I'm now ready to put my mask on because I'm done with my coffee.
Though that's an N95, isn't it?
Yes.
Those are hard to breathe through.
Oh, well, some of us manage. You know, you can buy those online by the gross, basically. And that's what I did, so I've got all kinds of these things.
Yeah, they can get a little spendy here locally.
Yes. And we are back on the record. We were considering a hearing date to consider case 2021-2, and we have heard so far that December 8, 2021 suits at least Mr. Stewart. Mr. D.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am available on the 8th, just on that date. Yes.
Thank you.
That December 8th.
December 8th, and Mr. Wheeler is as well.
Yes, sir.
And Madam Clerk, you are, or somebody from your office will be?
Yes.
All right, so December 8th it is. How about 10 o'clock? Would that be suitable, Mr. D?
It would be absolutely great.
Okay, Mr. Stewart,
Yes, that would be great.
Mr. Wheeler,
Yes, sir. Good.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and if you could give a little direction on how long you would like the hearing to be scheduled
Oh,
for?
boy.
4 hours?
What is our usual? It is 4 hours, is it not?
4 hours.
Okay, so for 4 hours on December 8th, starting at 10 a.m. And presumably that is a meeting in person, either here or someplace else at City Hall.
Should be able to meet in this room, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes.
I understand that there is an ordinance in the works to allow Teams meetings or telephonic. It may or may not be in effect by that date. If you want to express a preference, if it's available, you could do that now and then clerk would know.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Wheeler. If that ordinance passes, is it mandatory that there be Teams meetings, or could we still do it in person here?
I would check with the clerk, but my understanding is it's not mandatory.
Madam Clerk?
That's correct. It would be an option for boards and commissions to
Okay.
do virtual meetings and establish quorum through virtual meetings.
Okay, well, it would be my preference to have a meeting in person, but if need be, we can always switch to a Teams meeting. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And if that's the case, I would hope that somebody alerts me beforehand so that we can arrange for that. Is that okay?
I believe it'll be the chair and the board's preference.
Okay, all right. So then I will make a motion that Appeal 2021-2 be considered by this board, consisting of Mr. Stewart, Mr. Deek, and myself on December the 8th at 10 a.m. for 4 hours. And right now, we are scheduling it for an in-person meeting. If need be, it will be changed to a Teams meeting. May I have a second, please, for
Yes,
that
Mr.
motion?
Chair,
Mr.
second.
Deek, thank you. And for the reasons stated, I am in favor of the motion, and I really do not have any further comments.
I do have one, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Deek?
Yes, we are, at least personally, I am in the process of reappointment. And also Mr. Stewart, who will speak for himself, is in the process of his term expiring. So we need to note for the record that we are operating under the extension process, and that timeline is within that extension process. And I would like to be continue this case, highlighting that we are still legal members of the board.
Thank you so much for alerting us to that, Mr. Deek. I'm very appreciative of those comments. Mr. Wheeler, that is correct, right? Mr. Deek can continue at least to consider this case and perhaps also another pending case. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the terms expired mid-October, right? So just this past week.
Right.
And I believe it's 120 days timeframe in which they can serve until there's a reappointment. So certainly the December 8th schedule for this 21-2 is fine. It's well within the window.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Any further discussion regarding the motion? Mr. Stewart?
None.
Okay. All right. I have nothing further to add. I'm obviously in favor of this, and so I intend to, of that date, December 8th at 10 a.m., so I'm going to vote in favor of that motion. Hearing nothing further, Madam Clerk, would you simply call the roll on that?
Mr. Gutell?
Yes?
Mr. Deek?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Thank you so much. The motion passes by a vote of 3-1, and we will then consider case 2021-2 on December 8th, commencing at 10 a.m. All right. So then we come, and Ms. Pease will again participate in at least this portion. Appeal 2021-3, and I'm looking at agenda item 6B. And the first thing we have to consider is whether there are any panel members' disclosures regarding a conflict of interest. Now, what we have in front of us, or what we have received, I should say, is the notice of appeal that was filed by Pope and Teacher on behalf of the appellant Douglas Penn. And so my question to each board member is, on the basis of that notice of appeal, do you have any conflict of interest, or is there anything that would prevent you from considering that appeal? And I'm first turning to Ms. Pease.
I have read the notice of appeal, and I do not see any reason that I would have a conflict of interest.
Okay, Mr. Deep.
I'm not aware of any conflict of interest, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Stewart.
I have no conflict of interest.
Okay, and I have no conflict of interest. So we are in the fortunate position to have let me backtrack. The record is not yet complete. Do we
Correct.
have any idea from the clerk when it will be complete?
I am aiming for the end of next week.
Okay, all right. So the question really is whether it would be appropriate to, in order to expedite things a little bit and to avoid unnecessary burdens for board members here, whether we should simply establish a panel and a date for considering the appeal, or whether that's totally premature so that we really shouldn't be doing that. Mr. Wheeler, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Mr. Chairman, I think if the board would like to do so, it could certainly anticipate the typical briefing cycle and at least get something calendared that works for the board. Conversely, you could wait until the record is served, but as the clerk's indicated, it's within the next week or so. So I don't know that it makes a big difference in terms of your consideration of what date you want.
No, I would like to avoid having to have another scheduling meeting, quite frankly. So I would prefer to have, number one, the schedule established, and number two, the panel established. So I would like to accomplish that. Now, let us assume, Madam Clerk, you need to help me out, and you need to look at the calendar, if you would, please. Assuming for argument's sake that you are going to be done scheduling things by the end of next week, you said?
My goal, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So basically by the end of October you're fine. It's all ready for briefing. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe the appellant has 7 days to pay, once we notify them that the appeal record is ready, I believe they have 7 days to pay for it.
So that's one.
Then, I could be wrong, but I believe it's 15 days for their brief, another 15 days for the
3, 5,
appellee brief, and another 15 days for the reply brief.
5. So that's 7 weeks. I kept track of that. So 7 weeks from the end of October, that brings it to the middle of December. That's not a good time, is it now? And then the question is, assuming that to be the case, what is then Mr. Wheeler's schedule in order to provide the bench memo that should be done sometime around the middle of January?
Yes, sir. I think somewhere in that second or third week of January would be fine.
Okay, so we could schedule things for the third week in January, correct?
That works for me, sir.
All right, so let me ask Ms. Pease first. How are you for considering case number 2021-3 in the third week of January? That is January 16 through 21, 22.
Well, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is the 17th, and I may have plans for that
Sure.
3-day weekend, but the 18th through the 21st, I can be available.
Okay, Mr. Deek.
I believe, I don't know UA schedule yet, but I think the 18th will be okay.
Okay, Mr. Stewart, it has been suggested January 18.
I'm available on the 18th or any time during that week.
Mr. Deek, let me ask you this. Are you also available on the 19th?
Well, that's what I don't know, but probably, let's go with yes.
Okay, all right. So January 19, that gives a couple days in between Martin Luther King holiday and the hearing date, and I think that would be preferable to all of us in terms of preparation. So, Ms. Pease, would you be available on the 19th as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Deek,
Yes,
January 19th?
up to 1 p.m., I believe.
So we would have to meet at 9 o'clock.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because I'm pretty sure our schedule is gonna clash there.
Okay. Ms. Pease, is 9 o'clock on January 19 okay for you?
Fine with me.
Okay. Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
All right, and it's fine for me. So, the first thing we can do is we can make a motion to consider Appeal 2021-3 on January 19 at 9 a.m. And I
I'll make
will
that
make
motion.
that motion. And Mr. Deek
I
will
will
second that. So, for the reasons stated, and there's really, I should ask Mr. Wheeler whether that's okay with you.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, all right. And Madam Clerk, it's okay with you as well?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, so for the reasons stated, I intend to support that motion to consider 2021-3 on January 19, commencing at 9 o'clock and ending at 1 p.m.
Could we add 2022 to that?
That's, I'm sorry?
2022 after the January 19th?
Yeah.
Did I miss that?
Well, I thought I called that case correctly, January 19, 2022.
There we go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I follow this up again?
No, I may have missed it.
Okay, all right. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on that first?
Mr. Gutell?
Yes?
Mr. Deep?
Yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Pease?
Yes.
Thank you. And the motion passes by a vote of 4-0 to consider 2021-3 on January 19, 2022 at 9 a.m. So then the next thing to consider is, since there are 4 persons available to hear this matter and only 3 are needed for the panel, who is going to excuse himself from hearing this? I must tell you, my preference would be that at least Ms. Pease participate in that case, and that she not excuse herself from that panel. How do you feel about that, Ms. Pease?
Yes, I am happy to participate, given that I've been recused from the 2 previous cases in 2021.
Okay, so that then leaves the issue with either Mr. Deek or Mr. Stewart or myself. Mr. Stewart, how do you feel about this?
I have another admin hearing sometime December, January. I'm not sure when it's going to be, but it's complicated. It's in another forum. So I don't know. I'm glad to see this was scheduled now, because that's going to create some issues on my availability if there was a conflict.
Okay, so
It does.
would you be willing to recuse yourself from that? Although it would be your swan song, so to speak.
I would, because I've got another thing that is going to
Okay.
take some time.
Okay, and before I turn to Mr. Deek, Mr. Wheeler has something to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're in this unusual situation where we have 2 members whose terms have expired, and we don't know what the administration is going to do. Would it be appropriate to sort of hold the final decision on the panel, if we can, a little longer? I know you want to set it now, but what if one or the other isn't reappointed or replacements picked earlier than we think? Do we want to just set the panel and then meet if we have to, or hold off and do it the other way? Options.
I must tell you, my druthers would be that we set the panel right now, and if need be, we reconsider it. But Mr. Deek may feel differently about the matter.
Oh, I have a lot of feelings about this process, but one thing I have strongly recommend is that we set the panel and we march along before we all expire. And that way we can finish this business, because it's prudent for us to finish the business of these people and do it in an expeditious manner. And we are legally obligated, I guess, to be legal, so that the time frame actually allows that to happen. And I had no illusions that I will be one of the panelists, because I was expecting that perhaps Mr. Stewart would would recuse himself, so I'm happy to participate on January 19th.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pease, any comments regarding this matter? Scheduling it now versus scheduling it later when we know whether Mr. Deek is still with us or not?
I agree with scheduling it now for expediency
Okay,
and revising later if necessary.
thank you. Let me ask you, Mr. Wheeler, just to be on the safe side. I was under the impression that even if a term expires, they can, the expiring board member, so to speak, can still participate in pending cases. Or is there an absolute deadline to the pending cases, and that is 60 days?
Mr. Chairman, I'll have to go back and look at that and see if it matters, because I know that they have 120 days to serve after the term expires. So obviously there's an expectation that they continue to participate, but at the end of the 120, then what? And of course, while their term has expired, the administration could fill the seat at any time.
Well, but even if it is 120 days, we're still okay
Yes, sir.
with January the 9th.
Yes, sir.
And it doesn't.
19th, I'm sorry.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think that's why I would encourage us to act. And
Yeah.
I, no lawyer, but I read the statute and was on board enough that I believe that the extension expires even if cases are pending, because you have no legal status beyond the board until you're reappointed.
Yes. So, is that okay with you, Mr. Wheeler?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I was just pointing out the
Okay,
different
all right,
options.
good.
I
So we
just-
are just fine.
I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
I just want to confirm that the assembly does not have to agree to this 120 extension.
Mr. Wheeler?
My understanding is it's basically automatic. I mean, you could of course choose not to, but it's in place. The assembly doesn't have to do anything affirmative. The only thing that would shortcut your remaining time would be either your election or somebody else's in your place.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Stewart?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments regarding the panel that would consist of Ms. Pease, Mr. Deek, and myself on January 19 at 9 a.m.? January 19, 2022 at 9 a.m. Any further discussion regarding that matter?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. Pease?
Nothing else.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart?
Nothing.
And I do think my notes are not complete on this, but I think there's a pending motion, correct? Madam Clerk, help me out.
Motion to consider appeal 2021-3 on January 19th at 9 a.m.
Of the panel consisting of Ms. Pease, Mr. Deek, and myself, Mr. Guccio. All right? If there's no further discussion regarding that motion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Guchow?
Yes?
Mr. D?
Yes,
Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
Ms. Pease?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and the motion passes by a vote of 4-0. And so unless something happens in between, we will simply meet then. If something happens in between, we will have to consider the matter at hand and see how we handle it. That's really what happens. And so with that, we come to the almost the final item, and that is member comments. Ms. Pease, do you have anything to tell us or that you wish to disclose or discuss at this point?
No, I guess yes, I just one very minor thing. With regard to disclosure of potential conflict of interest, I thought that the notice to appeal on case 2021-3, it gave just the minimum necessary to determine conflict of interest. For example, that there was no map of where the lots lie. So if I don't have any property in Girdwood, so I don't, feel that I'm adjoining or adjacent or anything like that, but it would be helpful to probably know the location a little bit more specifically when figuring out if a person has conflict of interest.
Okay. Well, it strikes me that if a conflict arises during the pendency of this case, that any board member who feels there may be a possibility of a conflict would alert everybody promptly so that the matter can be considered.
Yes, agreed. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Stewart, any comments that you wish to make?
Yeah,
at this
if
point?
there is a bind, I know this other case is going to take me a lot of preparation, but I still could be, I'm still an alternate to make sure that this case gets through.
Yeah.
If something happens and we have to change the panel.
Okay. Mr. Deek, anything further?
Well, if this is member comments, so I would make this a New Year's wish that the planning board will do such an exquisite job that we will not see each other for a while. As much as I love it, I would like to take a break.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler, any last thoughts on the matter?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I have nothing. Oh, Ms. Pease, yes, I called on you. Anything further you want to tell us or not?
No, thank you for allowing me to participate telephonically, and I hope I can meet in person the next time. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I don't have anything else. I must tell you, there has been a lot of activity by this board here in the last 2 or 3 months, and that has kept us all on our toes, as it were. So I appreciate the work that all of you have done and that you have helped me out, and that includes particularly the clerk, who really has the majority of the work to do in these cases. And I know your office is very busy. So thank you very much for working with us on these matters. And that also goes for Mr. Wheeler, who I know is very busy working for the building here. Thank you very much. I have nothing further. And we then come to the last item, and that is audience participation. Please note that audience participation may not concern the adjudication of matters before the Board of Adjustment. And we cannot hear argument or take additional testimony or other evidence. We may only consider the materials contained in the appeal packet. So, is there any member of the audience who wishes to address us not regarding a pending case? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, I don't know if there is anybody on the phone.
I am on the phone.
Would you identify yourself, please, for the record?
Yes, this is, sure, for the record, this is Joan Priestley.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, the reconsideration of or doing it right, actually, this time, of my notice of appeal is not being considered at this meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Really? Is it going to be considered in the future?
There's nothing pending on the agenda at the present time. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chair, I could be mistaken, but I believe Ms. Priestley is referring to the item that you moved to reconsider and affirm earlier in the meeting. I believe she may have gotten on late.
Oh, I see. Okay, so.
I could be mistaken. We might need to clarify with Ms. Priestley, but I believe that's what she's asking about.
Okay, Ms. Priestley, which are you talking about the motion to reconsider that you had filed much earlier?
No, I was sent an agenda of the appeals and I don't know what to call it, a discussion of the order denying my notice of appeal. So it may be that you have discussed that before I got on. I was on at 10 o'clock.
Well, I can tell you that agenda item 5A1 concerns the order denying the request to accept notice of appeal that was the order that was signed and filed September 3, 2021. And that's what you're referring to, isn't that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. I can tell you that the board today, and apparently this occurred before you participated, has moved to and approved a reconsideration of that order and then affirmed it. So that item was addressed at today's meeting.
Oh, deferred it until a specific meeting time?
Yes, today.
I mean, I understand that the order was, the discussion was approved to reschedule a reconsideration. Am I correct so far?
No, we reconsidered the order denying the request to accept the notice of appeal of December 3, and by a subsequent motion, affirmed that decision. And we did that, affirmed the decision of September 3, 2021. Okay?
Oh, I see.
So that it was considered today.
And you simply affirmed that order. So there was no
Simply
superseding decision
Go ahead, please.
today. So, all right, so you reconsidered it, however briefly, and affirmed the previous order. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. I can continue with my appeal then. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I mean, I'm not thanking you for that procedure, but I am thanking you for clarifying it for me.
All right. Is there anything else you wish to tell the board that does not concern the pending appeal?
No, thank you.
All right. Then, hearing nothing further, I think it is appropriate to adjourn, unless there's any reason not to do that. Madam Clerk, do you see any reason not to adjourn? Mr. Wheeler?
No, sir.
Ms. Pease?
Nope.
Mr. Deek?
I'm good to adjourn.
Mr. Stewart?
Nothing further.
All right, and I have no reason not to adjourn at this point, so this hearing is adjourned.